Hi, everybody. What's up? We are coming on here in just a couple of minutes, leading the charge. Another fun Monday. We have Ryan Talbot from Syracuse.com and the Shout podcast coming on. He's going to be awesome. I can't wait. Comments, questions, leave them in the chat. We're going to answer as many as we can get to tonight. Obviously, a ton to talk about. Rookie minicamp, free agency, a little bit of just what we've got from the schedule leak. Oh, and look at that. There's our guest of the hour, Ryan Talbot. Hi, Ryan.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm great. Folks, this is the beauty of live stream. We are not live on TV yet. That's coming in a couple minutes. Ryan, can you just go ahead and just test my mic and just give me a hey, hello, and how are you? And maybe introduce yourself to the folks who are unfamiliar with you.
Yeah. Hey, hello. How are you? My name is Ryan Talbot. I'm a Buffalo Bills beat reporter for the Syracuse Post-Standard, Syracuse.com, and co-host of the Shout Buffalo Football podcast.
I figure if you're a Bills fan and you've been following the Western New York beat for a while, then you're going to know the Shout podcast with, of course, our mutual friend, Matt Perino. Bald is beautiful, Ryan. I know Matt's going to get so many compliments about his hair, but don't ever let him take the full credit for having the best hair, because bald is a style and it is beautiful, my friend.
That's right. There's quite a few of us in the Buffalo media there in the beat that have that bald head. So I fit right in there.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, we are going to come on here, folks, just in a little bit. We're going to go live on TV in just a second. So we're going to wrap this up. But again, leave your comments and questions. We're going to answer them, as many as we can get to tonight. A lot to talk about. So we'll see you in a little bit here on TV. To get into, from everything like rookie mini camp, then we have free agency talk, and then you've probably seen this on social media if you're following. The NFL schedule is releasing. Now, we're going to get some leaks. We're going to hear more as we get ready for the official deadline of when that schedule is going to drop Wednesday at 8 o'clock. And listen, I figured you might not want to listen to me for a whole 30 minutes talk about it, so that's why I have brought my friend Ryan Talbot from Syracuse.com, and more importantly, and more probably known from the Shout podcast with fellow co-host Matt Perino. Ryan, it is a pleasure to have you on here. I believe this is your Leading the Charge debut.
It is, yeah. It's an honor to be on with you, Dom.
Well, I'm happy to have you. There's a lot to get into, Ryan. Obviously, viewers have come to know you and Matt as being one of the premier podcasts and Bills talking points when it comes to the content game. I know you weren't there with us Friday, but just from what you've seen and what you've talked about with Matt just on the Shout podcast, what are your general takeaways of assumption of what rookie minicamp kind of shaped out to you?
Yeah, the big takeaway for me is maybe people are sleeping a little bit on Jackson Hawes. There's a lot of defensive players in this draft class that I think are going to have huge roles on this team. But Jackson Hawes, the tight end that they drafted, you really look at what they did this offseason. Quentin Morris left in free agency. So they have that tight end 3 vacancy just sitting there for the taking. And you look at the offense the Bills ran last year, Dom, jumbo package about 22% of the time in run plays. Now, you don't have to do that with Jackson Hawes now in this offense. You can play him in that spot. And then sometimes instead of, handing the ball off to James Cook, you can have him drop into the flat. And he showed some pretty good hands at rookie minicamp. So rookie minicamp, there's not a lot to take away from that. It's It's hard because of the quarterback play,
Right.
and everything else. But I really do think that maybe one of the later additions is going to have a bigger role than some envision.
Well, and it's funny you bring up offense because when I think of the rookie in this draft class, obviously everybody's attention, Ryan, they point to the defense. That's where they picked their first 5 guys in this draft from. But Caden Prather had a really strong day too. And it's an interesting kind of note there too, because we're going to get to later in the show when we talk about some free agents. Elijah Moore has entered the conversation now. So you have Caden Prather, who had a good day and maybe could show something in training camp. That's an offensive guy who might just sneakily compete for a roster spot, maybe be the Tyrell Shavers kind of camp darling this upcoming year. When you looked elsewhere around maybe we'll go defense here too, did anybody kind of surprise you in terms of just the value of where the Bills were able to get them? So not much what we saw Friday, but a lot of people were surprised that Landon Jackson was able to be there in the 3rd round. You go back to that draft, who are you surprised the Bills were able to get in terms of just their value?
Yeah, Landon Jackson's a great choice because there were some mock drafts that came out where he was in the mix there late in round 1. So to see that he falls to round 3 and the Bills obviously fell in love with this prospect. He was very vocal about it, that being Jackson, talking at his pro day. I talked to the Bills almost every single day, he said. He said it was the Bills and the Commanders kind of talking to him daily. And for the Bills to be able to land him, I think that was a great value pick for the team. And I'll go even further, Jordan Hancock. I really think that this is going to be that Swiss Army knife for this Bills defense. Brandon Beane said after the draft, we're going to start him out at safety. There is an opportunity for him to get some snaps there at safety, obviously, despite what they've done in free agency. And then he also can play, though, in that slot cornerback role. He can play on the outside. Yep. Love his athleticism and everything he brings to the table.
You know, and the biggest takeaway from me from the moment that we got through the draft process to when I actually got to watch some of these new faces on Friday, Ryan, was that the Bills took size and they made it an identity point here. And that was something that I don't think the Bills have really addressed it. It's not something that has been talked about when you associate size with the Buffalo Bills on really either side of the ball. But I have my notes written here. So TJ Sanders is 6'4". Landon Jackson, he is 6'7". Deion Walker, he is 6'6". So if you're trying to find an identity, size happens to be it. And it's funny you bring this up, or I bring this up rather, is that Landon Jackson talks about how that size, all these SEC guys, how they wreaked havoc in college. And then Max Hairston, their first-round cornerback, who obviously doesn't have defensive lineman size, let me tell you, he was just really happy that they're on his team. Take a listen to this.
The talent we have, and, man, we were all SEC defensive linemen. So it's great to get all of us in one room. And I feel like we really could really play really well.
Man, I'm looking at a bunch of Giants, and I feel good knowing that them Giants are on my side. Yeah, him, Landon up there too. But those, like I said, those guys are Giants, and I'm glad I'm playing with them and not against them.
So, Ryan, this goes back to that conversation that, a couple weeks ago, Brandon Beane gets on WGR and talks about why they wanted to go size, go defense, what they felt was the right move as compared to the wide receiver conversation. But you go back to what could have happened should that size have manifested in the way to the AFC Championship game in Kansas City. Why do you feel like the size was such an important factor of this Bills defense? And what kind of difference do you think a rookie group like this can sprinkle into the mix that's already there?
Well, when you look at the playoffs, the last few seasons, it's the defense that has let the team down at the end of the day. Yep. They're giving up far too many points. They're not getting off the field. The Bills' bread and butter this past season was creating turnovers, and you can't survive like that year in and year out. So the Bills needed to add some size, get some guys that you can get off the field. And you mentioned, Landon Jackson, Deion Walker, TJ Sanders. Even if they don't get to the quarterback, the wingspan on these guys, the general size, the next best thing you can do is bat the ball down. They're good against the run. They're good against the pass. That's going to really help up front. Landon Jackson right there, first and foremost, he's going to get rotated in very quickly, especially with the Michael Hoyt suspension those first 6 weeks. There's going to be a workload for him. The defensive line as a whole is something that the Bills love to rotate their players. So he's going to have an opportunity. The same for TJ Sanders. Ed Oliver is he hasn't necessarily had this type of player playing behind him. And I know that he can play 1 tech and 3 tech, but I think he's going to find mostly a home at that 3 tech position. That can let Ed Oliver be a little bit more fresh at the end of games. And he's explosive, that being TJ Sanders, can get after the quarterback, really good against the run. Deion Walker going to bring him along a little bit slowly because of the back injury. But when you can get him out there, The size is going to help significantly against the run. He's got to play a little bit lower, but that's certainly going to help. And they do need some help in that defensive tackle position, just like I talked about with the suspension to Hoyt. They have a suspension of Larry Ogunjobi, and they're going to need as many bodies as possible there on the interior as well as on the outside.
Yeah, and I look back at that AFC Championship game being on that sideline, and we talked about this 2 weeks ago when I was on the show with Matt and how important I thought size was. Bills go out and address it. But just in terms of impact, Ryan, we got about a minute or so here before we're going to wrap up. And again, this is Ryan Talbot, Syracuse.com, the Show podcast. If you have questions, send them on in here. Lori says, good evening to both of us, Ryan and Dom. And then Joe, we're going to get to your question in just a little bit. He says, what do you guys think of the international games? Obviously, the 2023 London game didn't go well. When we talk a little bit more schedule, we're going to get there. Ryan, in terms of when you look at this rookie class, who do you think has to be the most impactful given the opportunity and the realistic opportunity to actually see some playing time this season?
Has to be Max Hairston. They need a cornerback number 2 desperately opposite Christian Benford. And, Dane Jackson, Trey White, I like the depth part of that, but I don't want to necessarily see them out there starting for 10, 12 games. I want there to be an absolute option that can grow into a cornerback 1B opposite Benford. And that's exactly what Hairston can be for this team. Now, he's not that prototypical cornerback that they've used in this system in the past. He's a little more slender, the tackling, he's got to work on that a little bit, but the explosiveness, the way that he can jump routes when he is playing using his eyes, the ability to, use his speed if he does get beat off the line. Those are going to be things that the Bills aren't used to necessarily having at that cornerback position.
Well, remember all the times that, Brandon Beane was criticized for not drafting speed. Well, they went out and got the fastest guy in the draft. It's not on the offensive side of the ball. It's not an Xavier Worthy, but hey, when those games get down to an AFC Championship and you're going against Xavier Worthy and the Kansas City Chiefs offense, for example, now you feel like a guy, Ryan. You got some speed to match up with one of those speedy wide receiver threats they're going to see around the AFC. All right, Ryan Talbot's going to stay with us into the next block. He's going to answer more of your questions along when we go to the break. So be sure to tune in on Facebook or on social media, on X for our stream. We're going to send it to a quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk free agency, schedule, and a whole lot more. You're watching Leading the Charge. Stick with us. We'll be right back. All right. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah,
no first show there. It's always easy to, or I should say hard to get through the first block of the show. The rest of it, nice and smooth sailing, my friend. So, it was, I'm looking at the size. I just kept going back to that so much because when we're in the locker room, if it's after the game or practice, Ryan, I remember I feel like I'm doing the Statue of Liberty hold to Greg Rousseau when I'm talking to him. And now it's next to Landon Jackson, next to Deion Walker. I mean, those guys are big human beings too. And I like what you brought about Max, because I think it's obvious. Hey, you draft a first-round cornerback, knowing the last time you drafted a first-round cornerback, it didn't work out. So Max Hairston has to work in theory, right? But also, I feel like, Ryan, if you get a guy who can produce, maybe not that Christian Benford level, but can show the signs that he can be there and be that solidified starter, I mean, this defense takes it up another notch. Am I right?
Oh, you are 100% correct. You go back to the AFC Championship game and you see Christian Benford exit early with that second concussion. And you see the way that the Bills could not respond in the secondary after that.
Yeah.
No offense to Kyrie Elam, but that was a mess of a game for him, falling over, losing coverage. They had to address this cornerback position. And Hairston, going into the draft, I didn't know if he was necessarily the best fit for them, but the Bills fell in love with the skill set, the talent. And I like that they're trying a different flavor of cornerback, so to speak, in terms of what he brings to the table. So after the way last season ended, the uncertainty that they've had the last few years at cornerback in general, I really do like this move.
And going to the comments now, remember, questions, comments, concerns, send them on in here. Mark Bouchard says, tell Ryan, Boom Boom says hello. I really think Beane watched how the Eagles handled the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, and that's what we need to do. So, in front of multiple million people, the recipe was right there. I'm not saying it's a one-size-fit-all, but it's a good place to start, Ryan, is boosting up the interior because, hey, if that doesn't work, then I think you've got other issues if you're the Bills.
100%. Shout out to Mark. Mark is a dedicated Shout fan, always at our live shows. Yeah, the blueprint is there in terms of what the Eagles did in that Super Bowl, what Tampa Bay did years ago in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. The blueprint is getting after that quarterback, making life miserable, forcing the ball out, and the Bills haven't been able to do that. Mahomes has been able to sit in the pocket in those games and kind of shred them time and time again.
Yeah. All right. We're going to continue that conversation. We're going to get into some free agency stuff. Again, send your comments, questions, concerns to us. We're going to talk about it. We are about to come back on TV. So get ready. We will transition and we'll stay talking to Ryan. Here we go. And welcome back to Leading the Charge, everybody. I'm Dom Tibbetts at Syracuse.com, and Shout co-host podcast is Ryan Talbot joining us here on a very fun special edition. So the first block of the show, Ryan, we talked all about rookie minicamp, the fresh faces. There are guys who are going to be competing for coveted 53-man roster spots. There are also guys in that mix who are veterans, who have been in this league forever. So I want to talk a little bit about the free agents. What have your kind of just general thoughts been since this process started in March? The Joey Bosa news came in, and then you've got Josh Palmer, I think was the first guy in, to more recently now we have Elijah Moore. How have you felt the Bills attacked free agency? Is that something that you kind of think they needed to do or could have gone different routes?
I was actually really impressed with what Brandon Beane did. The Bills didn't have a ton of cap space, and yet they were able to restructure, release, move some money around to be able to get a guy like Joshua Palmer, who he brings something to the table that the Bills wide receivers haven't been able to do, and that's create separation naturally off the line. They needed a wide receiver like that. I know Palmer's been wide receiver number 3 with the Chargers. I really think that opportunity, though, is here for him in Buffalo to be a big-time producer. Brandon Beane thinks so as well. He said that at the end of the season, that's going to be the player we talk about the most in terms of making an impact on this team. Joey Bosa on the other side of the ball, this is a no-lose type of deal for the Bills because they didn't invest big money long-term. It's a 1-year deal. If he is injured this season, like he's been the past few, then you go to your Landon Jackson and you rely on maybe Javon Solomon to take the next step. You know what you have in AJ Epinesa. We've talked about Rousseau. But when Bosa is healthy, he is a game wrecker. And as we've been talking about, you need guys that can wreak havoc on the quarterback, and a healthy Bosa can do just that.
Well, and you mentioned that too when you're talking about Ed Oliver, maybe a TJ Sanders, creating the depth at that position where the Bills necessarily haven't had it. I think you make a good point with Bosa, right? If Bosa doesn't work out, the injury history comes back and starts to nag him a little bit, which could very well happen. It has happened, unfortunately, throughout his career. You have a Landon Jackson, and you still have AJ Epinesa in the last year of his contract. You have a newly re-signed Greg Rousseau, who they clearly have a lot of faith in. Sticking with the free agency, Ryan, and we'll get to some schedule questions. I see them coming in here in just a second. We'll transition to that. Who do you think has the easiest or maybe quickest path to being an impactful free agent signee under this Brandon Beane regime?
That's a great question. I probably have to stick with Bosa in terms of I think he's going to be out there starting opposite Greg Rousseau week 1, knowing what he brings to the table. Late in games, you can maybe put him out there in those obvious pass rush situations, try to keep him fresh in games, but also long-term down the entire stretch of the season. Palmer makes sense. I'm intrigued by Elijah Moore. I'm not ready to say that yet. He's had some really bad quarterback play, but he has produced with bad quarterbacks the last 2 years. 2 years ago, he had a career high in receiving yards. This past year, career high in receptions. So, finally having a good quarterback at his disposal, knowing what his pre-draft grade was coming out, it's at least intriguing to see how he fits into this offense as well.
Yeah, I have been pounding the Elijah Moore trade since the beginning of March. That was my guy. I was like, I think this will fit for the Buffalo Bills. It'll fit what they need. And then a couple weeks ago, I had the greatest instant gratification moment I have ever had in my time here at 7. What I like about Elijah Moore is his ability to separate. He's coming off 2 years of 100 targets, Ryan. And you mentioned the quarterback play. He has never had anybody close to the caliber of Josh Allen. Look how Matt Collins is. That's why I always use that excuse. Look how Matt Collins was able to thrive in this offense with a guy like Josh Allen who set him up for success. It could be a plethora of guys. It could be Caden Prather, for all we know, who kind of reaps the benefit there too. But I got to talk to Khalil Shakir this weekend, and one thing he told me is that before they even get on the field right now, that wide receiver room, is going to get a lot closer. They're going to start building team chemistry. They're really just going to hang out more off the field to get to know each other, and that was a real fun conversation. Take a listen to this.
This past week, Obviously, a big part of the offseason is getting to know one another, bond with each other. I've always said, whenever you can get to know each other off the field personally and care for each other's families, it makes you want to play that much harder on the field for that person. So that's kind of what we're doing right now, bonding, getting to know each other. So when season comes, it's go time.
I mean, look, Joe Flacco, Jameis Winston, Zach Wilson. I feel like it's going to work out. But you bring up a good point, Ryan. There are a lot of guys who I feel like could be an impactful player. If Joey Bosa stays healthy, I think he becomes the difference maker that Von Miller was going to be back in 2022 before that ACL injury happened. I think that's how Bills fans wanted to manifest, at least there too. Before we go to the schedule conversations, or anything, last free agent talk you want to get in before we switch over to the schedule, Ryan?
Yeah, last free agent talk. Derek Forrest intrigues me a little bit coming from the Washington Commanders. 2022, I was really impressed with his tape. An injury and then a new coaching regime kind of buried him on the depth chart. There's an opportunity for him, and he can also play on special teams, so we know how much Buffalo values that. Forrest is going to be one of those guys I want to watch at training camp to see if he can at least make some noise, because we know they love Taylor Rapp. They want Cole Bishop to get that other starting job. But can he maybe win that safety 3 job over DeMar Hamlin? Obviously, Jordan Hancock, we don't know exactly what his role will be yet, but he's going to be thrown in that mix as well. So Forrest is going to have competition, but the talent was certainly there based on that 2022 tape.
All right, and before we get to the schedule, John Robert asked, do you think Elijah Moore will be a punt returner also? I want to make sure I get this in there. John, I don't think so. I think that's going to be Laviska Shenault's job, probably is why they brought him in to win that one. And if he doesn't, I could see them going to a Brandon Codrington again. So we could potentially see that. And let's keep talking about that as we get into the break here, because I'm getting told we're going to wrap up here in just a second. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep Ryan on for the last segment. Then we'll get into the schedule talk, and we'll do all of that and more. So stick with us. Leading the Charge returns right after this. Time flies when you're having fun, Ryan.
Yeah, you're not kidding. It's moving along. I just looked down and saw it was 7.
No, it cruises. It's the first block you feel lengthy, and then I always forget the second and third blocks go real quick. But yeah, the punt return, kick return, and it's easy because another question we have from Zach Volk is, how will the new special teams coach Chris Tabor change the philosophy in that group? I think they have to be sharper. They have to clean up the mistakes. I think that was a unit that severely lacked. I always said, Ryan, special teams should not be anything you talk about. Matthew Smiley's biggest criticism I had is that we talked about Matthew Smiley way more than we needed to be. You shouldn't have to do that. So in that conversation, what does a Chris Tabor special teams look like to you? Do you think Elijah Moore has a chance for the punt return job or kick return job here, or do you think they have their guy?
I think they want to give Shenault a chance to win that job. Now, mind you, not everyone's going to be able to make this 53-man roster. There's just so much depth and talent. So if Shenault doesn't prove anything as a receiver, or is just, one-dimensional, that could be his demise. That could be Brandon Codrington's demise on this team, because the more you can do, the better your chances will be. So there's an opportunity for more there. But when it comes to Chris Tabor, this was a highly respected special teams coach. Wasn't anywhere this past season, but the year before that was voted the second best special teams coach by players in this league. So he's also a guy that, players want to come and join and play for. And we saw how much the Bills coveted special teams early in Sean McDermott's tenure. They really did struggle, though, the last few seasons.
Yeah, and we're 30 seconds here to get to TV. But I just think a veteran coach like that's going to come in, kind of hit the reset button that I think that side of the ball needed. Time will tell with Elijah Moore, because quite frankly, Ryan, the other conversation, you bring that up with Laviska Shenault, Elijah Moore might not make the roster. That's a competitive room now. There's a lot of bodies and there's a lot of other needs elsewhere. So more we'll get into. Schedule talk coming up here, folks. Coming right back. All right, welcome back to the last block here of Leading the Charge on this beautiful Monday night. Syracuse.com and the Shout podcast co-host Ryan Talbot joining us. Ryan, time flies when we're having fun. We haven't even gotten to the schedule talk. But as the leaks have started to happen, your questions have come in. We don't know when the Bills are playing. We know who their opponents are. But I want to just generally ask here, how surprised will you be if the Buffalo Bills do not have the maximum amount of primetime games yet again? It just almost seems like that's death taxes and the Bills getting 6 primetime games, basically.
Yeah, I'll be stunned if they don't have at least 5 games, especially when you look at the schedule and the teams that they're playing this year. Kansas City, again, although that's been a hot 425 block for CBS.
Yep.
You have Philadelphia, you have the Baltimore Ravens, Cincinnati Bengals, even Tampa Bay. for this home schedule, the Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen storyline. There's going to be a few road games as well. Atlanta, a young team on the rise. I could see that being a primetime game against Buffalo. But the Bills draw big numbers with Josh Allen, so I'm anticipating at least a handful of primetime games on this schedule.
So shortly before we came on air, I know a lot of people have asked, are the Bills going to get a holiday game? Black Friday game has already been announced, and the Christmas game between the Chiefs and the Broncos has already been announced. So the Bills could either still play internationally or they could play on Thanksgiving. Out of those two, Ryan, what do you think is more likely? We know the Bills are not big international fans. They don't like traveling. But also, we go back to a couple Thanksgivings in the games they've played. There have been some significant injuries that have happened on Thanksgiving. So out of those two, which one do you think is more likely?
I think Thanksgiving is more likely of the two. You look at the international schedule and, Dublin against Pittsburgh, that is firmly on the table, in my opinion. I know there were some rumors that Minnesota might be that game. Madrid with the Dolphins. I don't know if they'd go back to London yet. So just the lack of opportunities there make me think that Thanksgiving is firmly in play for this team. And it's been a team that's played on Thanksgiving a bit over the years, obviously. The Saints game, the Lions game come to mind, the Cowboys before that. And yes, the significant injuries have been there, but there's been some great games, some great wins for this team. Yep. That game against Dallas was like Josh Allen's big moment on a national audience, pushing for the first down.
That was his hello and welcome to the league moment.
Exactly. And then that Detroit comeback, that back and forth game and how they won that. So I could see them being this new team that maybe takes that last slot on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, well, Mark again came in here and says, do you think Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and Dublin? I think that's a likely scenario. I just don't know whether or not that is going to manifest the way we all think it is, but it's certainly on the table. I mean, all of these are on the table now that we know the Christmas and the Black Friday is out of it. Going back to Joe's question from earlier, Joe DiVincenzo says, what do you think of the international games? Obviously, the 2023 London game didn't go well. Just as somebody, Ryan, I didn't go to London. I don't think you were there either.
I was.
Just as somebody who gets to watch the game grow on an international stage, are you a fan of just the game being overseas in general, or do you like it back here where, things are, a little bit more controlled?
I do kind of like the international scene to a certain extent. I was lucky enough to get to go to London with Matt. We spend almost a week there, checking things out, seeing the stadium, because at the time that's what we heard about. The new Bills stadium was going to be modeled after that stadium. So it was really cool from that perspective, seeing all the Bills fans kind of taking it over. But it was not so great from the injury perspective, from the way the Bills played either. I think, if anything, if there is an international game on their slate this year, Sean McDermott and this coaching staff learned they can't wait to go so late in the week to go internationally. They probably would have to go maybe the day after the previous week's game, get acclimated to the schedule change, get used to it. So that way, come game day, they're a lot more prepared. International is going to be tough, though, because, 9:30 a.m. games, those aren't necessarily ratings bonanzas in the States. And you want Josh Allen to be in those slots where you can draw major ratings.
Exactly. And I think every TV executive would agree with that, Ryan. We have a couple minutes left here, about a minute and a half or so. So before I give you a chance to kind of shout out where people can find, watch, and read your work, have you seen the new stadium? I'm humbly going to brag that my colleague Jeff Russo did a really cool piece today. We got to see the stadium from down in field level, basically. Have you gotten a chance to see it? What are your amazement of just the progress of that stadium so far?
So I've not been inside of it yet. It's been unbelievable just from last season on game day to show up to a game and look across the way and see how much progress they were making on a week by week basis. So
it's
cannot
wild.
wait to actually, it is. Cannot wait to get inside there though. Check it out. I'm looking forward a lot though to the last season here at the stadium that the Bills fans still affectionately call the Ralph.
Yeah, it's going to be such a fun season here. Historic, lots of nostalgia, memories. Ryan, 30 seconds out, here. Where can people find, watch, and read your work?
Yeah, you can find me on all social media platforms at Ryan Talbot Bills. You can find my work at Syracuse.com and NYUp.com. And you can find Shout the Buffalo Football Podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms. And we also stream live on YouTube, Facebook, and X.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for taking your 30 minutes here to come talk to us. We really appreciate all the questions and comments in the chat. We thank you for tuning in for another edition of Leading the Charge on a beautiful Monday night. We'll be back next week and throughout the season as we get you ready for training camp. I'm Dom. That's Ryan. We'll see you next time. There we go. Stream. Thank you so much, Ryan. I didn't envision you having to be on this long, but the conversation was flowing. So thank you. As always, this was awesome, man. Thank you for taking some time and some effort to come here and do this. This was great, and we'll definitely do it again.
Yeah, this was, thank you so much for reaching out to me. First of all, I had a blast. It was a great time. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, you know what? You have a nod on Perino now. I mean, Shout has in my clubhouse, there's a Shout co-host, and it's Ryan Talbot, then Matt Perino.
Awesome.
All right, Ryan, thank you so much. Everybody who commented, thank you. We'll see you back here next Monday. Till next time. See ya.